Good evening, folks across America. If you're tuning in from the heartland or the coasts, you've probably heard the buzz about how global events are shaking up economies worldwide. Today, let's zoom in on Germany, our key ally in Europe, and the tough spot they're in right now. With the Ukraine war dragging on, skyrocketing energy costs, and those hefty US tariffs making waves, Germany's facing a real economic crunch. Their factories are sputtering, investments are shifting in unexpected ways, and there's even talk about pulling their massive gold reserves back from our shores. It's a story that hits close to home because it ties into our own energy boom, trade policies, and how the world sees the dollar. Buckle up as we break it down, because what happens in Berlin could ripple right back to your wallet. First off, Germany's economy has always been the powerhouse of Europe, built on manufacturing giants like Volkswagen, BMW, and Siemens. But since the Ukraine conflict kicked off in 2022, things have gone sideways. Cheap Russian gas was the lifeblood of their industries. Think cars, chemicals, and machinery. In 2021, Russia piped over 150 billion cubic meters to Europe, with Germany as the big beneficiary. Fast forward to 2025, and that's plummeted to just 37 billion from Russia, while U.S. liquefied natural gas, LNG, has quadrupled to over 81 billion cubic meters across the EU. Here in the States, we're now the top fossil fuel supplier to Europe, accounting for 19% of their imports last year. For Germany specifically, about 10% of their gas came via LNG terminals, and a whopping 96% of that LNG was American. That's our shale revolution at work. Texas, Louisiana, and Pennsylvania fields pumping out gas that's keeping European lights on. But this shift isn't cheap. Without Nord Stream pipelines, remember, President Trump took credit for halting Nord Stream 2 back in his first term, calling it a bad deal that made Europe too dependent on Russia. Germany's stuck buying our LNG across the Atlantic. It's more expensive to liquefy, ship, and regasify. In 2025, the EU shelled out around 396 billion euros on fossil imports, with each citizen ponying up about 880 euros. For Germans, that means higher production costs eating into profits. Their industrial output took a hit, down 1.1% overall for the year, with a sharp 1.9% drop in December alone. That's not just numbers, it's factories slowing, jobs at risk, and companies like BASF warning of plant closures if energy stays pricey. President Trump was vocal about this from the get-go. He said, "I ended Nord Stream 2 and pushed hard for Europe to buy American energy instead." In a 2025 interview, he boasted about our vast reserves. "We have so much oil and gas, you won't be able to buy it all." His executive orders early in the term lifted the Biden-era pause on new LNG export approvals, fast-tracking projects to flood Europe with U.S. gas. By mid-2025, we were supplying 57% of Europe's LNG, and projections show that climbing to 75 to 80% by 2030 if deals hold. The EU's July 2025 trade pact with us commits to $750 billion in American energy purchases by 2028, including LNG, oil, and nuclear. That's a win for U.S. jobs. Our export terminals in the Gulf are booming, but for Germany, it feels like trading one dependency for another. If we control 80% of their LNG, prices could spike or supplies get leveraged in trade spats. Remember, Trump's team has floated using energy as a bargaining chip. This energy squeeze is hammering Germany's manufacturing. Output in key sectors like autos and machinery dipped 3%, excluding energy and construction, in late 2025. Volkswagen reported a $2.5 billion hit in the first 9 months, with margins squeezed tight. They're halting new U.S. factory plans for Audis because, frankly, building here avoids tariffs but doesn't solve their cost woes. U.S. producer prices are up 3% since tariffs kicked in, with steel jumping 30 to 50%. Add sticky inflation as rates drop, and it's a tough sell for foreign firms to relocate stateside without massive subsidies, which would balloon our deficit and spark a subsidy race no one wins. Speaking of relocation, the narrative in Washington is that tariffs will force European companies to friendshore to the U.S., bringing jobs and factories here. But data tells a different story. German direct investment in America tanked 45% in 2025, dropping to about 10 to 11 billion euros over 10 months, from 19 billion the year before. Exports to U.S. fell 8.6 to 9.3%, a crash amid uncertainty. Will tariffs stick? Could courts or a future admin reverse them? Committing billions to a U.S. plant is a gamble when policies flip-flop. Plus, our market's competitive. Ford, GM, Tesla, plus Japanese and Korean brands vying for shrinking EV demand. Germans aren't betting big here. Instead, they're doubling down on China. German FDI there surged 55% to 8.3 billion euros in 2025, a four-year high. That's despite U.S. pressure to decouple. Why? China's ecosystem for high-tech manufacturing is unmatched. Low costs, vast supply chains, and proximity to booming Asian markets like India and Southeast Asia. German firms aren't just exporting to China, they're building there to serve global demand beyond the U.S. Our consumer base is huge, but growth engines are shifting east. DHL's targeting Brazil, Mexico, India, China, and ASEAN for future expansion, not us. Macron's Beijing visits aren't tourism. They're about securing supply chains to stay competitive. This pivot underscores a bigger irony. Trump's tariffs aim to break globalization and reshore industry, but they've fragmented it, pushing allies toward rivals. Germany's trade with China hit 253 billion euros in 2025, reclaiming the top spot from us at 241.6 billion. Our tariffs on their goods, like 20% on cars, make U.S. entry tougher, so they're eyeing markets where they can win without barriers. Now, amid this, a new panic's brewing in Germany: their gold. They hold the world's second-largest reserves, 3,552 tons, worth nearly 450 to 600 billion euros. Gold surged 19-fold since 1999, a hedge against inflation echoing their Weimar history. But a third, 1,236 tons, 164 billion euros, is in New York Fed vaults, a Cold War relic for quick access if needed. Another 405 tons in London rest in Frankfurt. Lawmakers, economists like Emanuel Münch, ex-Bundesbank research head, and even former officials are demanding repatriation. Why now? Trump's back, and transatlantic trust is frayed. We've frozen Russian assets, held Maduro's gold in London. Trump threatened retaliation if Europe dumps treasuries. Munch calls it too risky to leave gold here, urging strategic independence. Politician Marie-Agnes Strack-Zimmermann wants a clear timetable. If tensions spike over tariffs, NATO, or Greenland spats, access could be blocked. Germany's in fiscal straits too. They're launching a 500 billion euro special fund for infrastructure and climate neutrality. 48.9 to 60 billion annually from 2026 to 2029 for roads, bridges, green tech. Total spending: 524.5 billion euros in 2026, up 21.5 billion from 2025. But borrowing competes with our massive deficits. Yields could rise. Selling gold could fund stimulus without debt spikes, but how if it's locked abroad? Last repatriation, 2013-2017, took years. They moved 674 tons but left much behind. Central banks globally are hoarding gold, net buyers despite rising prices, as dollar doubts grow. If Germany pulls back, it signals eroding faith in U.S. custody, potentially pressuring the dollar system. For us, it's a reminder. Our leverage has limits. Allies are hedging. So what's the takeaway for America? Our LNG dominance is a win, creating jobs and influence. But pushing too hard risks alienating partners, driving them to China or Russia alternatives. Germany's not reshoring here, they're going east. And gold calls highlight trust erosion. As we navigate Trump 2.0, balancing energy exports with fair trade could keep alliances strong. What do you think? Should Germany bring the gold home? Will their pivot to China hurt us long-term? Sound off below. Stay informed, America. This world's interconnected. Approximately 2,150. Disclaimer: the information presented in this video is for educational and entertainment purposes only. It is not intended to be and should not be construed as financial, investment, legal, tax, or professional advice of any kind. All discussions about economies, markets, government policies, or economic trends are based on publicly available data and general analysis as of February 2026, and may become outdated or inaccurate due to changing events. Investing in commodities, stocks, ETFs, or any financial instruments involves significant risks, including the potential loss of principal. Past performance is not indicative of future results. Viewers should conduct their own thorough research, consult with qualified financial advisors, and consider their individual financial situation, risk tolerance, and objectives before making any investment decisions. The creator of this video is not a licensed financial advisor, and any opinions expressed are solely those of the narrator and do not reflect the views of any affiliated entities. We do not guarantee the accuracy, completeness, or timeliness of the information provided. Links or references to third-party sources are for convenience only and do not imply endorsement. By watching this video, you agree that the creator shall not be liable for any losses or damages arising from your use of this content. Always verify information independently, and remember, no investment is risk-free.